Welcome back. You're still watching S8 Today. We continue now with our focus on Matric results, and to unpack the 2018 results, so we're now joined via Skype by Dr. Nicholas Spaull, who's an education expert and Director of Funda Wande, South Africa's education curriculum. Well, let's get across to you now. Thanks very much for joining us. Welcome to the program. The Minister yesterday released the results, and the pass rate has improved, it has increased. Does that tell us a story about an improvement in education?
I think that the Matric statistic, or the Matric pass rate that gets traditionally reported, is one statistic that does measure the health of the education system. It tells us how many Matrics of those that write Matric pass, and that's an important statistic. But I think it's one of a number of other statistics. We can also look at the throughput rate, so how many children that started in grade 1 actually made it to Matric and passed, and that's only about 40%. So if you've got a 78% Matric pass rate, but if we look at it relative to the grade 1 pass rate, that's only 40%.
Do we know what causes this drop-off, this throughput rate that's problematic? Has that been investigated? Do we have the answers to that?
There's quite a lot of evidence that points to a few factors, but the most important factor is weak foundations in the primary school years. So unless you develop strong foundations, unless you learn to read for meaning, you learn to calculate with confidence and use the 4 operations, it's very difficult to succeed later in the schooling system. So a lot of the failure that we see in high school, and when people fail Matric or they drop out, we can trace back to the fact that they haven't acquired fundamental skills like learning to read in the first 3 years of school. So yes, there is quite a lot of evidence that points back to that, and some other factors as well. So for female learners, pregnancy and teenage pregnancy is often one of the reasons why they drop out. But for both boys and girls, you find that weak foundations is one of the main contributing factors of why they don't make it to Matric and why they don't pass.
All right, and we've been seeing over the years that for some reason grade 10 seems to be the point at which we get most of the drop-off. What is it about that year in particular, or is it just the beginning of the Matric proper curriculum that becomes challenging?
Yeah, so I think it's your second point there, that as we lead up to Matric, the school system starts reacting to this external exam by holding students back if they aren't ready for it. And it's actually because of this exact policy that the progression policy was introduced in 2014-2015, which doesn't allow schools to hold back students for more than once per cycle. So per 3-year schooling cycle of grade 1, 2, 3, or 4, 5, 6, etc., you can only fail once. And that's a pretty standard policy around the world. A lot of countries have the same policy, and I actually think it's a very good policy, rather than holding back kids unnecessarily year after year after year until they drop out.
All right, talking about around the world, how do we compare here in South Africa? I'm just wondering, 12 years of education in Singapore, 12 years of education in Denmark is not the same as 12 years of education in Zimbabwe or in South Africa. Tell us about those differences, and where do we fit in that line?
Yeah, so that's quite a difficult question to answer, because obviously our exams are different. The Matric exam in South Africa is different to the national exam in Singapore or in Zimbabwe, for example. What we do have is we take part in a number of international assessments. One, for example, is at the grade 9 level, where we test the nationally representative sample of our grade 9 students in maths and science tests that 50 other countries around the world take part in. And unfortunately, what those studies show is that we typically come last or second to last of the 50 countries that participate in those studies. The silver lining to that message, though, is that we have been improving. Since 2003 to about 2015, there was quite a consistent improvement in maths and science outcomes at the grade 9 level. And that's something that the Minister mentioned in her speech. And she recognized that there has been progress in the sector, not only in Matric, but also earlier down in the schooling system.
All right, so I'm going to make you the Minister of Basic Education for a day, and I just wonder, what are the things that you would do? What are the interventions that you think we need to be putting into play to really get our country up there and competing with the rest of the world? Because after all, we are creating global citizens more and more.
We are. So if I was the Minister of Education for a day and could implement policies that would actually last, I think what I would focus on is the foundation phase. So grade R to grade 3, because that's where children's foundations start. That's basically the start or the end of their journey. And I think I would focus on early grade reading and ensuring that all children learn to read for meaning in their home language before they switch over to English and learn in these other languages as well. And the way to do that is through teacher development. At the moment, teachers in South Africa don't know how to teach reading. They've never been taught, they weren't taught under apartheid, and they haven't been given those opportunities post-apartheid. So the early grade reading study of the department, which is the department's own initiative, shows that coaches in classrooms with lesson plans and graded readers lead to children learning to read. We often think that the fourth industrial revolution means that we need to give iPads to every single child or laptops, and I think that's definitely the wrong policy. What they need is books and languages that they understand and teachers that actually know how to teach them to read. That's the best way to ensure that they have a successful schooling career, that they have a post-schooling career, and that they can compete internationally.
All right, Dr. Nicholas Spaull, that's where we're going to leave it. Thanks very much indeed for your insights.